This series of videos in the countdown to polling day, December 12th, conclude in a detailed seats forecast for the Tories, Labour, Lib Dems and SNP. Analysis and forecast based on 9 key lessons learned from 2017 general election that I covered in an earlier video, whereas the opinion polls have consistently been wrong for now 4 UK elections in a row and thus should be ignored, whilst the most accurate predictor of UK elections has consistently been my house prices based forecasts and average earnings growth. For this election, the 9 key lessons learned resolve into 5 pieces of in-depth analysis that aim to accurately forecast the outcome of the December 12th vote, of which 3 pieces of analysis have already been completed, including my UK house prices based core forecast that was first made available to patrons who support my work on the 24th of November 2019. So for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month. Looking at government debt that partially includes Bank of England cooking the books, i.e. QE, projects to an estimated £1.8 trillion for the year to April 2020. That's based on ONS data. The depth graph on face value implies that the Tories over the past couple of years have managed to get a grip to some degree on what was a rampant build-up in debt, the consequences of which at the very least are stagflation. That should in theory allow the government some room to borrow for election bribes. However, real debt to GDP paints a picture of a highly indebted economy that has no room to borrow, let alone to go on Labour's £135 billion annual spending spree. Note that where debt to GDP is concerned, I am using official ONS figures that currently treat £170 billion of QE as government borrowing liability. However, the central bank has monetised £430 billion of UK government debt, i.e. gilts. What this implies is that the ONS is being selective in what it treats as government liabilities. Real debt to GDP is actually far higher than what the debt to GDP based on official figures implies. The only reason I am sticking with the official figures is because it is difficult to quantify the real world impact of total QE, i.e. at what point does QE impact negatively, given that the government is effectively paying itself interest on the £430 billion of gilts held by the Bank of England, much of which is transferred back to the government. So maybe £250 billion is the amount above where subsequent QE is treated as an increase in debt burden. Something to keep an eye on, especially if the ONS starts trending in the other direction by further cooking the books in the government's favour, that according to my calculation stands at £430 billion and not £170 billion that the ONS factors into its debt statistics. The graph explains why Theresa May in 2017 had a net neutral election manifesto, as the government had literally no room to manoeuvre with debt to GDP standing at 93%, looks set to fall to 89% by the end of the current financial year. Current debt to GDP of about 90% also answers the question why the likes of the IFS are warning that the Conservatives are likely to spend more than that which has been costed in their manifesto. Because unlike Corbyn's Labour Party, the Tories in government understand that there is no room to borrow more unless forced to do so due to commitments. Instead, the debt to GDP chart is flashing a red warning light for future tax hikes and spending cuts by the Tories. So it's no wonder that Tory manifesto is weak and vague on spending, barely touching on the big elephant in the room, one of financing the growing burden of an ageing population, which will likely result in higher spending and deficits than the Tory government is budgeting for. Labour's £135 billion annual spending spree resulting in a net increase of 105 billion of borrowing per year, is just not going to happen. Labour's spending binge would see debt to GDP increase by about 5% per annum, which means within a couple of years of a Labour government we would be passing 100% of GDP, a trend that will be accompanied by a severe sterling bear market, prompting interest rate hikes and inflation taking off even on the highly manipulated fake CPI inflation measure that tends to underreport real inflation that people actually experience by about half, i.e. current real inflation is about 3% and not 1.5%, whilst RPI, a more accurate measure of UK inflation, stands at 2.4%. Unfortunately, the government has plans to bastardise the RPI measure further by making changes to RPI to manipulate the rate lower towards that of CPI, so as to complete the job of hiding Britain's real inflation rate from the general public, which is typically twice the CPI rate, i.e. currently 3%. My next video will look at how the manifestos impact the general election forecast. Now, the rest of this analysis has first been made available to patrons who support my work. So, for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month. And also remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel for the next video in this series as we count down to the 12th December general election.